to gather the refugees, the Rohingya refugees, into this island. And this is not something which is very different, which is done in other countries. We also have seen Australia has also contained the refugees to a processing and resettlement island in Nauru, and Australia has also done the similar thing in Manus Island in Papua New Guinea. So,
Norman, if I can interrupt you at this point in time, so I want to ask you, because when you bring up Australia, it's very clear that there's been much criticism of the Australian policy, and especially from human rights advocates and also some social groups. And I want to come back to your piece, though. While you say you're not advocating the specific solution, a similar, kind of mimicking the Bangladesh one, you do build up a case against the Rohingya refugees. I wanted to ask you to begin with, why is it that you do not address the genocidal policies of the Myanmar government that are pushing refugees out of Rakhine State in the first place? I mean, you use very emotive language like gelombang demi gelombang in your piece in Sinaharian.
But I think, to me, is that the only solution at the moment for Malaysia is to contain them in an island. You know, very similar to, unless we do this, we are going to face an influx of refugees, Rohingya refugees coming from Bangladesh, and we must realize this: the refugees, the Rohingya refugees who are coming now, they are not escaping from persecution. Those who are coming now are coming directly from the refugee camps, which means they are actually they are economic refugees.
Okay, all right. I want to come back to that point, your claims about that they are economic refugees. But I want to come back to to what you said about containment, the need to contain the refugees. Is that, from your point of view, the only solution to the refugee crisis? Segregation and then repatriation. What about affording refugees rights to work and get education and healthcare, about their self-determination and integration into local community? Does that not factor in?
I don't think so. You see, when you do that, you are sending the message to the refugees in the refugee camps in Bangladesh that they can come here, they can then find they can start a new life here, you know, as a refugee, and it will create other problems. You know, I don't think so. That's the right way to do this.
But okay, let's address that. I mean, you know, in many countries, refugees are integrated into their local communities, and in fact, some of them have been very successful, right? And therefore, you have UNHCR promoting this idea that refugees could be an asset to a country, the host country. But you have a very interesting perspective, and I wanted to kind of push you on that, because you say that because they are now transiting through a refugee camp, they're no longer politically persecuted, and in fact economic refugees. And that's an extraordinary claim to make. It doesn't make, there's no logic in what you're saying, is there?
Well, I still maintain what I said, that we cannot open up the country to refugees where they have an open country. You know, because we must remember this: there are some 800,000 Rohingyas in the refugee camps in Bangladesh. There are about 600,000 Rohingyas in Rakhine State and in Myanmar. But if the government were to send a message, well, they can come here, they can work well, they're refugees, and we are sympathetic to them, then what we are doing is that we are going to open this country to the rest to come here. And you must also remember
that... do you consider your views xenophobic?
Sorry?
Do you consider these views to be xenophobic?
Sorry, I didn't get you.
Do you consider your views to be xenophobic?
We are not being xenophobic. I don't think so. You could consider that when we prioritize the nation, and the nation's interest that we are being xenophobic, because this country has been very accommodating to refugees from fleeing refugees and from many other countries. You must understand that we have refugees from so many countries, from Somalia, Pakistan, Ethiopia. We have also.
But Norman, isn't that part of our international obligations? I want to take you up on this idea that you put out in your piece that, in fact, given the chance, all the refugees now in internment camps in Bangladesh would come here to Malaysia, when in fact refugees have been trying to return to their homeland, to their farms and to their livelihoods, now interrupted by the Myanmar coup. I mean, you make this extraordinary claim. On what basis do you make a claim that Rohingya refugees all want to come to Malaysia? Norman, are you still on the line?
All right. We seem to have lost Norman off the line. We'll come back to this conversation. We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned.
Bila sentuh soal berita, tiada masa untuk tunggu. Kepada anda kami bawakan susulan dan kupasan yang terkini. Tiada drama dan tiada pengulangan. Usah tunggu lama-lama. AWANI 7.45 lebih awal dari biasa.
Kini berwajah baru.
Ini pula susulan khas pesawat Back Air di Kazakhstan. Pesawat berkenaan dilaporkan tergelincir 2 kali.
Notifikasi berita terkini dan navigasi mudah. Podcast dikemas kini dengan berita dan program.
Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope.
Serta video tanpa had dengan scroll tanpa henti. Buat turun aplikasi baru Astro AWANI sekarang.
Gagalan Kerajaan Persekutuan tunai janji melaksanakan projek baik pulih sekolah Daif turut diulas Menteri Muda Pendidikan dan Penyelidikan Teknologi Dr. Anwar Rapai.
COVID-19, 2 lagi kes disyaki atau PUI direkodkan di Sarawak.
So hopefully kita akan mendapat kedudukan yang lebih baik di masa-masa akan datang.
Udang geragau atau bubuk dalam bahasa tempatan terkenal sebagai bahan utama dalam pembuatan belacan atau cencalo.
Amanah di tangan kita. Adat, budaya dan semangat. Di kesinambungan perpaduan tanah air yang tercinta. Berteraskan adab yang
Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa, Idris. With me is Sharaad, Kuttan. We've got Norman Fernandez back on the line. He's a lawyer who wrote an opinion piece in Sinaharian earlier today looking at the Rohingya refugee situation in Malaysia. Sharaad, I'm going to pass it to you to repeat your question for Norman just before the break.
Yeah, sorry, Norman, we were cut off there. I just want to come back to your claim that most Rohingya refugees want to come to Malaysia, when we know that there's in fact a repatriation exercise. The refugees often want to go back to their homeland, their homes, their land, before they were forcibly, through violence, through rape, through arson, pushed out of their country. Why do you make this claim? On what basis do you make this claim that Rohingya all want to come to Malaysia?
I'm not making the claim that all the Rohingyas want to come to Malaysia, but looking at the present situation and the Rohingyas who are already here, where they are free, the message which is being sent to the Rohingyas in the refugee camps is this, that it is easier to be in Malaysia then wait in the refugee camps for resettlement in third countries. In this country, rather than
Norman, can I quote you? Can I quote you? You say in your article, tidak keterlaluan untuk mengatakan ke semua mereka mau datang ke Malaysia. That's exactly what you wrote in your piece.
I think yes, I will stand by it because that is the choice. Most people, given a chance, they will all want to come here because
no, I think given the chance, they would want to return to their home country.
I don't think so. They will want to go to their home country because the home country themselves do not want, are not recognizing them as Burmese or Myanmaris. Now that is.
But isn't that the root of the problem?
Sorry, that is a different issue altogether. But you must understand, in Myanmar there are other Muslim. It is not a persecution of the Muslims because there are other ethnic Muslims. Like for example, you have the Pantai who are Chinese Burmese. You have the Lebanese who are Indian Muslims. Then you even have the Pishus who are Malay Muslims in Myanmar. They all can live in peace with the majority Buddhists.
Right.
But the problem is actually with the Rohingyas. So
in your piece, Norman, you didn't address those pressures, those underlying pressures of what the Myanmar government has done to the Rakhine state. But I want to talk about in your piece that you point to recent news that hundreds of Rohingya have gone missing from a refugee camp in Indonesia and they're believed to have been trafficked to Malaysia.
Yes,
Why is it that in your piece you did not address the fact that human trafficking requires local collusion, that often human trafficking goes high up in the food chain? Why was that not addressed?
Well, that's for another coming up article. But this year, I wanted to address only on the thing of containing. That's the whole idea of endowment of an island. And for the sole purpose of containing, if you do not do that, as I keep repeating, that we are going to be faced with a huge problem because those who are coming here are now economic. Firstly, they are no longer refugees who are being persecuted. They are economic refugees. We have refugees who are coming here who are...
Norman, you keep making this claim, and it's an extraordinary one. How can you say people who are in a refugee camp who cannot return to their homes are not economic refugees? How did you miraculously transform them into economic refugees?
For a very simple reason. You just have to look that to Bhasan Char, it is only about 125 kilometers. But they don't want to go to Bhasan Char, which is only 125 kilometers.
Yes, it's an island that gets flooded in the monsoon.
It is not.
It's an uninhabitable island.
That is the perception or whatever given by the Western NGOs and all, claiming that this is flood. The Bangladeshi government has spent some $350 million developing the island. It is well contained, perfectly this one, and there is no reason that your lives are going to be endangered there. But
Norman, you also seem to take the position that there is not, in fact, a policy of Islamophobia in Myanmar, that other Muslims live in peace and harmony, but it's only the Rohingya. Tell us why you think the Rohingya are disliked.
Well, if you want to go, that will take perhaps almost one whole session to find the reason. But it's a historical thing. There has been animosity between the Rohingyas and the Myanmaris. Many of them are.
Does it justify genocide? Does it justify genocide?
We talk about Rohingya genocide, but we do not talk about the genocide and what about the atrocities done by Rohingyas to the local Buddhists, to the local Hindus. We don't talk about that, but we are looking at only from something like from 2017, 2015, and I think that is wrong. We need to go back and look at historical perspective. Why they are hate? Why among the Muslim ethnic group?
But does it justify genocide, Norman?
I don't think so. I don't think so. You call, you see, what about atrocities the Rohingyas have done to the Hindus, to the Buddhists?
Okay, Norman, we're going to have to go to break, so we want to thank you for joining us on the show tonight. After this, we're going to be speaking to a refugee rights NGO. Stay tuned to consider this.
Bila sentuh soal berita, tiada masa untuk tunggu. Kepada anda kami bawakan fakta, susulan dan kupasan yang terkini. Tiada drama dan tiada pengulangan. Usah tunggu lama-lama. AWANI 745 lebih awal dari biasa.
Kini berwajah baru.
Ini pula susulan khas pesawat Back Air di Kazakhstan. Pesawat berkenaan dilaporkan tergelincir 2 kali.
Notifikasi berita terkini dan navigasi mudah. Podcast dikemas kini dengan berita dan program.
Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope.
Serta video tanpa had dengan scroll tanpa henti. Buat turun aplikasi baru Astro AWANI sekarang.
Hi, thanks for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Will the military coup by the Myanmar general responsible for genocidal policies in Rahkine state lead to another refugee crisis, a Rohingya refugee crisis? Joining us on the line now, we have Tham Hui Ying. She's the executive director of the refugee rights NGO Asylum Access Malaysia. Hui Ying, we just spoke to someone who advocated for a similar Bangladesh Basan-like solution for Rohingya refugees in Malaysia. What was your initial reaction upon hearing that?
Horrified. That was the first word that came to my mind. Horrified that anyone would entertain the thought of subjecting the world's most persecuted minority to such inhumane and degrading treatment is, something that's very disconcerting. Nauru, Manus, and, now Bashancha are names that evoke images of pain and suffering. We know about the horrifying consequences of being detained indefinitely on an island, of, self-harm and suicide, long-term trauma compounding pre-existing generational trauma. The high mental health toll, particularly among children, even in a quote-unquote open center like Nauru, shows we simply cannot deny the devastating impact of being deprived of your fundamental freedoms. So, even if one were not swayed by ethical considerations, right? So let's talk about the economic cost of such an endeavor. It costs between $400,000 to $570,000 per year to detain an asylum seeker in Nauru or Manus. By contrast, allowing asylum seekers to live in the community while their claims are processed costs just $12,000 per year. And it would have cost even less if they are allowed to the right to work. In Bangladesh, they spent more than 300 million USD on Bashancha. So, what are we saying when we suggest something like this? Are we saying that we are willing to waste Rakyat's money on constructing a torture facility? I mean, conversely, if we look at integrating refugees and providing them with the legal right to work, based on an IDEA's report, it is estimated that they would be able to contribute over $3 billion to our GDP. So I think the question here really is, why would someone rather waste resources and effort to set up an entire different state than to have people access existing resources and even contribute to the growth of our resources? Okay.
Can I follow up on that? Why do you think that there's such a concern about the free movement of refugees, or, there are concerns about local integration that's stopping policymakers from acting on this? What is the underlying issue here?
I think that it's kind of very clear for us to see that the underlying issue here is really about sort of xenophobia and anti-refugee sentiments, right? It's about trying to create this straw man to distract us from the real issues at hand. I mean, you know, in essence, what they are like. I mean, like what is the root desire, right? To sort of discard people out of sight in an island. This is all just sort of a distraction from what are the real issues that we're facing. You know, it's a distraction from. Sorry, yes.
Sorry, Hui, yeah, I understand that, and it's a very persuasive argument to some sectors of Malaysia. But I wonder, for those who maybe listen in a very casual sense to these proposals, it sounds very neat, right? We'll just put them all on an island. They can live together, and we'll provide them the resources until some solution comes along, like repatriation to their home country when it's safe, or a third country, that is willing to take them on, as they did the Vietnamese refugees on Pulau Bidung. That seems to be the almost reasonable tone that these proposals are made. But are they really that reasonable?
No. Not at all, and I definitely would not use the word neat to describe that. You know, the author is, in essence, propagating dangerous mass detention of people who are already subjected to generations of persecution and unspeakable trauma, and it's not something that we should be, entertaining at all. You know, we should not and we cannot be allowing such reprehensible ideas to fester. I mean, even sort of using that example that you used about, with the treatment of Vietnamese refugees. I mean, it's been described as a hell island. Right? It's not something that we're proud of. It's not something great. So, absolutely not. I don't think this is something that we can even provide an iota of space to consider.
Okay. Well, apart from segregation and then, repatriation, what, based on your work, have you seen to be globally accepted practices that perhaps Malaysia should be adopting?
Yeah, so I mean, I think just as a start, that I just think segregation and repatriation practices are not things that we should be even speaking about in the same breath as acceptable practices. But just to say that refugees on average spend around 20 years in exile before they have access to more durable solutions. And really, what we should be thinking about is about how we can help them rebuild their lives while they are in Malaysia. Because in Malaysia, of course, they do not have access to basic rights and are constantly in fear of arrest and detention. What we should really be thinking about is how we can cooperate with, UNHCR. What the government should be thinking about is how they can cooperate with UNHCR, CSOs, and refugee communities to develop a framework with basic rights, screening, asylum processes for management and protection of all refugees and asylum seekers. We need to be advocating with sending countries about their persecuted nationals. We need to be strengthening our, infrastructure by establishing an interagency committee. We've been talking about refugee frameworks for decades. It really doesn't require us to sign any convention to have a framework and interagency cooperation. These are things that we can do now.
Right. But
Sorry, go for it.
So if you could address the issue of kind of fatigue, the fatigue that comes from thinking, we are already in a tough place. Why do we have to now take on the additional burden of people from another country whose culture and language we don't even understand? In fact, is there, while there are people out there sort of building a case against the Rohingya refugee, calling them economic refugees, suggesting that they are involved in crime, and so on and so forth, do we need to do the counter narrative of building an argument for these kinds of international obligations? I mean, how would you even begin to do that if you think that's necessary?
Well, we absolutely need to be doing that. We absolutely should be concerned about the rise in xenophobic and anti-refugee sentiment, right? That is now sort of causing refugees in Malaysia to face very real discrimination, harassment, extortion, and exploitation on a daily basis. I think a lot of it comes from this ignorance of, who refugees are. We really have to understand that refugees are people who have experienced or have been or live in fear of persecution and or torture. They have fled their homes in search of sanctuary. And yet, while they're in Malaysia, they face, arrest and detention. And we've seen for almost a year now how the pandemic has created a cover for further erosions of their rights. Mm-hmm. So, let's talk about just the treatment of refugees, right? The appalling treatment of refugees in Malaysia. There are currently over 700 children in immigration detention. Over 50% of them are without parents or guardians. we are throwing people in the middle of a pandemic into immigration detention centers, and we're denying them claim to asylum, which is a basic human right.
Okay. I wanted to follow up with you a little bit earlier, and Sharaad touched on, the economic refugee. I wanted to ask you whether this picture that's been painted of an influx of refugees, wave after wave, gelombang demi gelombang, is that an accurate representation of the current refugee situation at the moment?
Absolutely not. Right? Look at the numbers that we're talking about. It's practically negligible. We currently only have about 170,000, around 170,000 registered refugees and asylum seekers. So compare that to the population of Malaysia. How is that even an influx? How is that even a drain in our resources? We are a country that's very rich in resources, and we really should be thinking about how we should be sharing and not hogging more of it, and trying to think about ways to, make things more difficult for people who are already fleeing persecution and hardship.
Right. Hui Ying, thank you so much for being on the show with us tonight. We appreciate your time and your insights. That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Don't forget to get all your latest news and COVID-19 vaccine updates on astroawani.com, also the Astro Awani app. Thank you so much for watching Consider This, and good night.